From the very beginning of the story, Usopp was built to have all his development in the kingdom of Elbaf. And now that we've finally reached this point, in this very arc we discover the most evil family in the world, the Davy Clan, showing us that Usopp may have a bloodline far more important than it ever seemed. So if you want to know all about this and much more, stick with me, because that's exactly what I'm about to show you. Now, one of the most fascinating things about One Piece is how Oda plants details that seem insignificant at first, only for them to later turn out to be fundamental to the story. And that's exactly what's happening with Usopp, because there's a huge possibility that he is a descendant of the Davy lineage, the same family as Rocksteady, Zebec and Blackbeard. I know it sounds crazy at first, but once you start putting the pieces together, the connections are mind-blowing. So first we need to understand the context. In the recent chapters of the Elbaf arc, we learned that Rocksteady Zebec's real name is actually Davy D. Zebec. He changed his name to hide, because the Davy family has been hunted by the world government for 800 years. Their ancestor, Davy Jones, was such an important figure that even Emu himself considers him a threat on the same level as Joy Boy. This persecution forced the Davy family to scatter across the world, changing their surnames and hiding their true identities. And this is exactly where Usopp comes into the picture. If there's a family that had to go into hiding and live in secrecy, it makes perfect sense that some of their descendants would end up in remote, quiet places, like Syrup Village for example. The village itself already raises some interesting questions. It's a place where many people don't stay their whole lives, and where family histories aren't fully known. We've never really learned much about Usopp's mother, Banchina, other than the fact that she died when he was a child. And on his father's side, Yaksop abandoned the family when Usopp was still very young, so there's a huge gap in his family history that has never been fully explored. On top of that, there are also striking physical similarities between Usopp, Blackbeard and Rox. When you put these three characters side by side, especially their childhood versions, the coincidences start piling up. All three have dark, curly hair, prominent lips, and a very similar facial structure. Usopp inherited the long nose from his mother, but the rest of his face actually looks a lot like Yasopp's. Yet when we look at Blackbeard and Rox, we can spot traits that also show up in Usopp. Blackbeard has a nose that, while not as long as Usopp's, is still noticeably prominent. And even with the few appearances Rox has had, you can pick out facial features that tie all three of them together. This resemblance isn't just superficial. In One Piece, Oda always uses physical characteristics to hint at characters who share the same bloodline. We've seen this with Luffy and Garp, with Ace and Roger, and now we're seeing it with the Davy family. So what if these similarities between Usopp, Blackbeard, and Rox aren't just a coincidence, but a clear sign that they all share the same bloodline? One of the things that has always defined Usopp is his special bond with giants. Ever since Little Garden, when he met Dorian Brogy, all the way up to now in Elbaf, Usopp has always had a natural connection with them. And here's something fascinating. Rox also had a strong relationship with giants, especially with Harold, the former king of Elbaf. In the recent flashbacks, we saw that Rox tried to recruit King Harold into his crew. He clearly saw the value in Elbaf's warriors and wanted them to be part of his plans for world domination. This link between the Davy bloodline and giants might not be random at all. And remember that theory I shared with you guys about Usopp's mother possibly having hybrid blood, a mix between giants and Tontata dwarves? That would explain her distinctive nose, which looks similar to the noses of the Tontata dwarves from Dressrosa. And it would also explain her normal human height. If Usopp's mother really carried that hybrid blood, it would make Elbaf literally the land of his ancestors. But there's another really interesting detail in One Piece: the constant parallel between dreams and ambitions. This is where things get truly mind-blowing. Let's talk about each of their dreams. Usopp's dream is to become a brave warrior of the sea, someone courageous and respected. He doesn't want to be the strongest in the world, he just wants to become the best version of himself. It's a very humble yet profound dream. Now think about this with me. What if Davy Jones had an ambition that was very similar? Rox wanted to become the king of the world because he saw it as continuing the legacy of his ancestor. He believed that Davy Jones had once been the king of the world in the distant past, and that Emu had overthrown him. So Rox's ambition was to restore the reign of the Davy family. But what if the true legacy of Davy Jones wasn't about absolute power at all, but about being a legendary warrior? Someone whose bravery and strength was so immense that they became part of pirate mythology itself. The Davy backfight exists to honor that very memory. If this interpretation is correct, then Usopp's dream of becoming a brave warrior of the sea is perfectly aligned with the real legacy of Davy Jones. He doesn't need to conquer the world or become the strongest. He just needs to become so brave and legendary that his name will be remembered forever, just like Davy Jones. And of course we can't talk about Usopp without mentioning the most obvious parallel in the entire story, David and Goliath. That biblical tale of the young shepherd who defeated a giant warrior using nothing but a sling is clearly one of the main inspirations for Usopp's character. And here's the kicker. Dave is literally an alternative English spelling of David, which is Davy in Portuguese. This connection between David and Davy may be more than coincidence. In the Bible, David became the king of Israel after proving his bravery. He was small, unlikely, but had a courage that surpassed his physical appearance, exactly like Usopp. And Oda loves to use religious and mythological references in his story. I can't wait to see Usopp living his own David and Goliath moment in Elbaf. There's even a theory that he will manage to lift Ragnir, the legendary hammer of Loki, the one so heavy that not even the giants could move it. If that happens, it would be the equivalent of him pulling Excalibur from the stone, proving he is the true chosen one. And that brings us back to the Davy family. If Usopp carries that blood, then he's not just following in the footsteps of his father and Usopp. Unknowingly, he's fulfilling the destiny of his lineage. He is becoming the brave warrior that Davy D Zebec was 800 years ago. And there's a psychological aspect of Usopp that is crucial to understanding all of this. That is the Sogeking. When Usopp needed courage, he literally transformed into another person. He would put on a mask and become Sogeking, the king of snipers, someone confident and fearless. This might represent more than just a defense mechanism. It could be Usopp unconsciously tapping into the power of his Davy blood. When he becomes Sogeking, he's not pretending to be brave. He's revealing the courage that has always been there, buried beneath his insecurities. And when Luffy's crew asked where the island of snipers was, Usopp answered that it was in his heart. Well, Elbaf is the island that has always lived in Usopp's heart. He's always wanted to go there, always admired its warriors. Maybe, on some unconscious level, he already knows that's his true home. In this Elbaf arc, it will be the moment when Usopp finally accepts who he really is. He will take off the mask not because he no longer needs it, but because he will finally realize that Usopp and Sogeking have always been the same person. And that person carries the blood of one of the most powerful and feared families in the entire history of One Piece. But going back to the persecution of the Davy family by the world government, we know that for 800 years the world government has hunted down and exterminated members of this bloodline. God Valley was a gathering point for many Davies, and that's precisely why the Celestial Dragons held their native hunting game there. They wanted to wipe out the threat once and for all. Yet some escaped. Rox D. Zebec survived long enough to become the most dangerous pirate of his era. Blackbeard survived by hiding in plain sight within Whitebeard's crew for decades. And maybe, just maybe, some other Davies managed to hide in places so remote and seemingly insignificant that the world government never even thought to look. And Syrup Village fits that profile perfectly. It's a small, quiet little village in the East Blue, considered the weakest of all the seas. The perfect place for someone from the Davy bloodline to put down roots and try to live a normal life, far from the world government's spotlight. And if Banchina, Usopp's mother, was a descendant of that very lineage, it would explain so much. It would explain why she never spoke about her own family. It would explain why she accepted Usopp leaving to sail the seas, because she knew it was safer for him to stay far away from them. And it would explain why Usopp has always carried that feeling of not quite belonging, as if he never fully fit in that place. With that in mind, there are now three main bearers of the Will of Davy. The first was Rox D. Zebec. Then came Blackbeard, who directly inherited Rox's ambition to conquer the world. And then there's Usopp, who may be carrying that same blood without even realizing it. He represents the most human and vulnerable side of the Davy family. While Blackbeard embraced darkness and raw power, Usopp fights every single day against his own fears just to become a better person. And between these two extremes, we can start to imagine what Davy D. Zebec himself was really like. Maybe he possessed the grand ambitions we see in Blackbeard and Rox, but also the humanity and quiet bravery we see in Usopp. Perhaps his true legacy is this very duality: power and courage, ambition, and the determination to chase your dream no matter the cost. That would create a perfect parallel with the greater D clan as a whole. We have Luffy, carrying the will of Joy Boy to free the world, and we could have Usopp, carrying the will of Davy D. Zebec to become a legendary warrior. Two best friends, each unknowingly fulfilling the destiny of ancestors who were allies or perhaps rivals 800 years ago. When you step back and look at the grand picture of One Piece, it makes perfect sense that Oda is building these connections. He's always talked about inheritance, about how people's wills are passed down through the generations. And now we're discovering that two great families shaped the history of the world, the line of Joy Boy and the Davy line. If Usopp really is a Davy, it adds an entirely new layer to the Straw Hat dynamic. Luffy would be walking in the footsteps of Joy Boy, while his very best friend would be walking in the footsteps of the man the world once feared just as much as Joy Boy himself. It's almost poetic. Just think of the narrative possibilities. The final confrontation might not simply be Luffy versus Emu, or Luffy versus Blackbeard. It could involve this intricate web of inherited legacies and wills. Usopp might end up being the key to fully understanding the history of the Davy family, and perhaps even to redeeming their name. And Elbaf wasn't chosen randomly as the arc for these revelations. It is the land of brave warriors, exactly what Usopp has always dreamed of becoming. It's where Rox once came to recruit warriors for his cause, and it's where the legacy of the Davy family still echoes through the stories told by the giants. And I know not everything fits this theory perfectly. Usopp's nose might just be a Pinocchio reference, and a nod to the Tengu of Japanese mythology. The physical similarities could be pure coincidence. His connection to the giants might just be something Oda finds fun. But when you put all these pieces together, when you look at the full picture, it's hard not to see a pattern. Oda has spent decades planting seeds that only bloom many years later. He loves hiding clues in plain sight, and if there's one character who deserves a mind-blowing revelation in the Elbaf arc, it's Usopp. He's the human heart of the crew. The guy who was born without supernatural powers, or extraordinary abilities. So in the end, this theory might not turn out exactly as we're imagining it, but I bet anything that Oda has something planned for Usopp that ties directly into this connection with the Davy family. He might not actually have Davy blood, but one thing's for sure, the Straw Hat's sniper is definitely someone with a truly special story. Well, I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, I'd greatly appreciate your like, and please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new videos like this one. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end, and see you in the next one.